Stop what you're doing right now. Close every other tab. Turn off the TV. Because what I'm about to reveal to you is not speculation, not conspiracy theory, not another hot take from some talking head who doesn't understand how power really works. This is documented evidence, confirmed by Wall Street insiders themselves, that proves everything you've been told about Venezuela, about military intervention, about democracy and freedom is a complete and utter lie. And if you don't understand what's really happening right now, if you miss the connection between the U.S. military operation in Venezuela and the explosive moves we're seeing in silver and gold markets, you're going to be left behind while the biggest wealth grab in modern history unfolds right before your eyes. It's January 2026. The smoke is still hanging over Caracas. The political future of Venezuela remains completely unresolved. President Nicolas Maduro was abducted by U.S. Delta Force operators in an operation that violated every principle of international law, every norm of sovereignty, every pretense of democratic values that America claims to stand for. At least 40 people are dead, including civilians. The Venezuelan government says the United States launched an unprecedented assault involving more than 150 aircraft from 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere. Airstrikes hit military installations around the capital. A sitting head of state was removed without international authorization, without UN approval, without even a declared legal basis. But here's what should make your blood boil. Here's what should wake you up to the reality of how the world actually works. While the bodies are still being counted in Caracas, while families are burying their dead, while the Venezuelan people are trying to figure out what just happened to their country, Wall Street is already packing their bags. Not to provide humanitarian aid, not to support democracy, not to help the Venezuelan people. They're going to loot, they're going to pillage, they're going to extract every ounce of wealth they can from a nation that has just been conquered by military force. Charles Meyers, the chairman of political risk consultancy Signum Global Advisors and former vice chairman of Avocor, revealed in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that elite investors are already planning a reconnaissance trip to Venezuela. Hedge fund managers, asset managers, energy executives, and defense sector insiders, 20 people, 20 individuals are expected to arrive as early as March. Their mission? Assess opportunity and make deals. They plan to meet with a new government that will not be elected by the people of Venezuela. That's not what's going to happen. The new government is going to be shaped and fully controlled by the United States. Let me say that again, because this is critical. The new government of Venezuela will not be elected by Venezuelans. It will be installed by Washington. It will be controlled by Washington, and it will serve the interests of Wall Street, not the Venezuelan people. Meetings are already being planned with the newly installed president, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, finance and energy ministers, the central bank chief, and even the Caracas Stock Exchange. The speed of this mobilization is absolutely striking. It's as if they had been warned ahead of time, as if they had been preparing, as if this entire operation was coordinated not just militarily, but financially. And here's where it gets absolutely damning. Meyers describes investor sentiment as cautious optimism, not moral outrage, not concern for sovereignty, not horror at the loss of life. Optimism. He openly states that his firm does not take moral positions on U.S. intervention. Its job, he says, is to help clients anticipate opportunity and mitigate investment risk. And in his words, many very serious investors saw this coming. Some of them, he admits, bought Venezuelan bonds in advance, which positioned them to profit from military intervention before it even occurred. Let that sink in. Wall Street investors bought Venezuelan bonds before the military operation, knowing that the U.S. was going to invade, knowing that regime change was coming, and positioned themselves to profit from the violent overthrow of a sovereign government. This is not capitalism. This is not free markets. This is preemptive speculation on the illegal use of force. This is war profiteering at the most fundamental level. This is organized crime, dressed up in suits and ties, operating out of Manhattan skyscrapers instead of back alleys. The scale of ambition is staggering. Meyers estimates between $500 and $750 billion in potential investment opportunities over the next 5 years: oil, mining, infrastructure, tourism, construction. In this framing, Venezuela is not a nation in crisis. It's not a country whose people are suffering. It's an underdeveloped asset ready for extraction and exploitation by big corporations. It's a carcass ready to be picked clean by vultures in Armani suits. But that optimism rests on an operation that Venezuelan officials describe very differently. According to Caracas, the United States military launched an unprecedented assault. More than 150 aircraft, 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere, airstrikes on military installations, at least 40 people killed, including civilians. Delta Force operators abducting Maduro and his wife, removing a sitting head of state without international authorization. Under international law, the use of force against a sovereign state and the removal of its leader constitute a clear violation of the UN Charter. The absence of congressional notification also adds a constitutional layer of controversy domestically. But none of this seems to trouble Wall Street investors who are now busy scanning balance sheets and resource maps. President Trump has been remarkably candid about the motivation behind the intervention. He stood at Mar-a-Lago and did not speak of democracy or human rights. He didn't even mention those words. He spoke of oil. He said, "We're going to have very large United States oil companies, the biggest in the world, go in and spend billions of dollars." He promised they would fix Venezuela's badly damaged oil infrastructure. He also added that they would be reimbursed, and he spoke openly about taking a tremendous amount of wealth. Perhaps most revealing of all, Trump said the United States would run the country during an undefined transition period. It was a rare moment of honesty. Now let me connect the dots for you. Let me show you why this matters for precious metals markets. Let me show you why silver and gold are exploding right now, and why Venezuela is the catalyst that's going to take these markets vertical. Because everything is connected. The military operation, the Wall Street looting, the commodity price explosion, it's all part of the same story. And if you understand this story, if you see the pattern, you'll understand why we're heading into the most violent repricing of hard assets in modern history. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, around 300 billion barrels. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than any other country on earth. Venezuela also has vast deposits of gold, vast deposits of lithium, copper, and other critical minerals. These are precisely the resources that define 21st century power competition. These are the resources that every major economy needs to function. And for decades, these resources were not developed. Why? Because decades of sanctions imposed by the United States and other Western countries, isolation and financial strangulation, effectively crippled production. Oil output has collapsed from 3.5 million barrels per day back in 2013 to roughly 1 million barrels per day today. The infrastructure is crumbling. The refineries are in disrepair. The pipelines are leaking. Industry analysts acknowledge that restoring Venezuela's oil sector will require tens of billions of dollars and possibly a decade of sustained investment. Reuters reports that U.S. firms won't return until sanctions are lifted, security is guaranteed, and Venezuelan laws are rewritten to allow deeper foreign ownership. Do you understand what that means? It means Venezuela's sovereignty will be completely eliminated. It means foreign corporations will own Venezuela's resources outright. It means the Venezuelan people will have no say in what happens to the wealth beneath their feet. The beneficiaries are already clear. Chevron is currently the only major U.S. oil company operating in Venezuela. Chevron is well positioned to expand rapidly under these circumstances. ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips, both holders of arbitration awards that exceed $10 billion from Venezuela's 2007 nationalizations, stand to recover long-frozen claims. Engineering and construction giants anticipate massive infrastructure contracts. Defense contractors have already profited from the Caribbean military buildup. Their backlogs now extend through 2028. And then there are the bondholders, distressed debt investors who bought Venezuelan bonds for pennies on the dollar. Any restructuring under U.S. supervision could deliver extraordinary returns to these Wall Street investors. But here's what Wall Street doesn't want you to understand. Here's the part they're not talking about in the Wall Street Journal interviews. This operation in Venezuela is not just about oil. It's about something much bigger. It's about control of strategic resources in a world where those resources are becoming critically scarce. It's about making sure that China doesn't get access to Venezuelan oil, Venezuelan lithium, Venezuelan copper. It's about maintaining dollar hegemony. And it's about preventing the emergence of a multipolar world where the United States is no longer the sole superpower. And this is where precious metals come into the picture. Because what's happening in Venezuela is sending a signal to every resource-rich country on Earth. That signal is crystal clear. If you don't align with Washington, if you don't allow Western corporations to control your resources, if you try to maintain sovereignty over your own wealth, you will be destroyed. You will be sanctioned, isolated, starved, and if necessary, invaded. Mexico is watching, Peru is watching, Chile is watching. Every country in Latin America that produces silver, copper, lithium, or any other strategic mineral is watching what happened to Venezuela and thinking, we could be next. So what do? They hoard, they restrict exports, they demand payment in gold, not dollars. They start building walls around their supply. They implement resource nationalism because they've learned that in a world where the United States is willing to violently overthrow governments to seize resources, the only way to protect yourself is to control those resources as tightly as possible. Mexico produces 25% of the world's silver. If Mexico looks at Venezuela and decides to lock the vault to protect their national wealth, the global supply of silver drops by a quarter overnight. Peru, the second largest silver producer, could do the same. Bolivia has massive lithium deposits. Chile has copper. Argentina has both. This is the geopolitical risk premium that's driving silver and gold prices higher. Traders and investors are looking at Venezuela and realizing that the rules have changed. That military force is now an acceptable tool for resource acquisition. That international law is dead. That sovereignty doesn't matter. That if you have resources that the United States wants, they will take them by force, if necessary. And in that world, in a world where military aggression is the new normal, the only safe assets are the ones that cannot be printed, cannot be confiscated, cannot be devalued by government decree: gold and silver. But there's another layer to this story that's even more important. The U.S. military operation in Venezuela is accelerating the global de-dollarization trend. Countries around the world are watching the United States use its military to seize resources and thinking, if we hold dollars, if we hold U.S. Treasury bonds, we're funding the very military that might invade us tomorrow. So they're diversifying. They're buying gold. China has been accumulating gold for years. Russia has been accumulating gold. India, Turkey, Poland, Hungary, Thailand, all of them are buying gold. Central bank gold purchases hit record levels in recent years, and Venezuela is going to accelerate that trend. Because Venezuela is proof that the dollar is not a neutral reserve currency. It's a weapon. It's a tool of coercion. It's backed not by economic strength or sound monetary policy, but by military force. And countries that don't want to be subjugated by that force are moving away from the dollar as fast as they can. They're settling trade in yuan, in rupees, in their own currencies. They're bypassing the SWIFT system. They're creating alternative payment mechanisms. And they're buying gold and silver as insurance against the collapse of the dollar-based international order. This is why silver hit $79 overnight. This is why China deployed $10 billion into the silver market in a single Asian trading session. This is why U.S. banks surrendered their short positions, because they understand what's coming. They understand that the geopolitical stability that allowed them to manipulate precious metals prices for decades is gone. They understand that we're entering a new era where hard assets are the only real store of value. They understand that the dollar's days as the global reserve currency are numbered. And Venezuela is the catalyst. Venezuela is the event that's waking the world up to the reality that the United States will use military force to maintain its economic dominance. And that realization is sending capital flooding into gold and silver at a pace that the Western financial system cannot handle. The COMEX is being drained, the LBMA vaults in London are being drained, the Shanghai Gold Exchange is sucking physical metal out of the West at a rate that will take the registered inventory to zero by the end of January. Now let me show you the timeline of what's happening. The U.S. military operation in Venezuela occurred in early January 2026. Within 48 hours, Wall Street insiders were planning reconnaissance trips. Within 72 hours, silver spiked from $71 to $75. Within 96 hours, the Asian session exploded and silver hit $79. This is not coincidence. This is cause and effect. The military operation triggered the safe haven bid. The safe haven bid triggered Chinese buying. The Chinese buying drained COMEX inventory. The inventory drain forced U.S. banks to surrender their short positions. And now we're in a feedback loop where every day brings new highs, new volume records, new evidence that the paper market is completely disconnected from physical reality. The $500 to $750 billion that Wall Street is planning to extract from Venezuela, that money has to come from somewhere. It comes from printed dollars. It comes from Treasury issuance. It comes from Federal Reserve balance sheet expansion. It comes from monetary debasement. And every dollar that gets printed to fund the looting of Venezuela is a dollar that loses purchasing power. Every Treasury bond that gets issued to finance the occupation is a bond that foreign central banks are less willing to hold. Every expansion of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet is another reason for the world to move away from the dollar and into hard assets. This is the death spiral of fiat currency. This is what happens when a global reserve currency is backed not by economic productivity or sound money principles, but by military force and the willingness to use that force to maintain dominance. It works until it doesn't. It works until the rest of the world says, enough. And we're very close to that moment. We might already be past that moment. The fact that China deployed $10 billion in a single night to buy silver tells you that China has made a strategic decision. They're moving away from the dollar. They're accumulating hard assets. They're preparing for a world where the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. And what about the Venezuelan people? What about the families who lost loved ones in the airstrikes? What about the workers whose jobs depend on the oil industry that's about to be privatized and handed over to foreign corporations? What about the millions of Venezuelans who are going to watch their country's wealth flow out to Wall Street while they remain in poverty? Nobody is talking about them. Nobody cares. Because in the calculus of empire, people don't matter. Only resources matter. Only profit matters. Only power matters. This is what separates those who will preserve wealth in the coming years from those who will lose everything. Understanding that the system is not designed to be fair, it's designed to extract wealth from the many and concentrate it in the hands of the few. It's designed to use military force to secure resources. It's designed to use the dollar as a weapon. And if you're holding dollars, if you're holding paper assets denominated in dollars, if you trust that the system will protect you, you're going to be destroyed. The only protection is hard assets, physical gold, physical silver, assets that have held value for 5,000 years, assets that cannot be printed, assets that cannot be confiscated as easily as digital entries in a bank account, assets that have no counterparty risk. When Venezuela's resources are flowing to Wall Street, when dollars are being printed to finance the occupation, when the world is watching and losing faith in the dollar system, the only rational response is to own real things. Not paper, not promises, not digital ledger entries, real physical metal that you can hold in your hand. And here's what's going to happen next. The $84 level in silver is going to break, probably this week, maybe next week, but it's coming. And when it breaks, when we print a daily close above 84s, the melt-up begins. We're talking about $100 silver by February, $120 by March, maybe $150 by summer. Because the fundamentals have never been stronger, the geopolitical risk has never been higher, the dollar's credibility has never been weaker, and the physical shortage has never been more acute. Wall Street is looting Venezuela for $750 billion, but that's nothing compared to the wealth transfer that's happening in precious metals markets right now. Trillions of dollars are going to flow from paper assets into hard assets over the next 2 years. And the people who understand what's happening, who see the connection between military operations and monetary policy, between empire and inflation, between war and wealth preservation, those people are going to emerge from this crisis with their purchasing power intact and multiplied. The people who don't understand, the people who think everything is fine, the people who believe the mainstream media narrative about democracy and freedom, they're going to watch their savings evaporate. They're going to watch their retirement accounts collapse. They're going to watch as inflation eats away at their standard of living. And they're going to wonder how it happened. They're going to wonder why nobody warned them. But you're being warned right now. You're being shown exactly what's happening and why it matters. Venezuela is not a humanitarian crisis. It's a resource grab, and that resource grab is accelerating the end of the dollar system. And the end of the dollar system means the repricing of everything. And in that repricing, gold and silver are going to the moon. Not because of speculation, not because of technical analysis, but because they're real, because they're scarce, because they're the only assets that will hold value when the paper burns. So here's your action plan. If you don't own physical silver and gold yet, buy it now. Today. This week. Don't wait for a pullback that might never come. Don't wait for confirmation from CNBC. Don't wait until your neighbors are talking about it. Buy now while premiums are still reasonable, while dealers still have inventory, while you can still get metal delivered in weeks instead of months. If you're holding paper precious metals, convert to physical immediately. The counterparty risk is too high. The COMEX default risk is too high. The ETF redemption suspension risk is too high. Get the metal in your possession. Watch the Venezuela story closely. Every new development, every Wall Street meeting, every infrastructure contract, every barrel of oil that flows to U.S. refineries is confirmation that this is not about democracy, it's about resources. And every confirmation accelerates the move away from dollars and into hard assets. Watch the $84 level in silver. That's the trigger. When we break it, the race to $100 begins. And don't sell for dollars, because dollars are what's being printed to loot Venezuela. Dollars are what's losing value. Dollars are what the rest of the world is trying to escape. When you sell silver for dollars, you're trading real money for fake money. The greatest theft in human history is happening right now. Wall Street is looting Venezuela, and in the process, they're destroying the dollar system. And in the destruction of the dollar system, precious metals are being repriced to reflect their true value. You can participate in this wealth transfer, or you can be the victim of it. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because the window is closing. The reconnaissance trip to Venezuela is in March. The contracts will be signed shortly after. The money will start flowing. The dollars will be printed. And by the time the mainstream media figures out what happened, silver will be at $150 and unavailable at any price. You've been warned. You've been shown the truth. Now act on it.